First of all, let me check. Are you hearing me clearly?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Very well. So there are a lot of things happening yesterday which helps me. But I'm always very interested to have conversations with young people in Africa, particularly on the subject matter that is most very close to my heart, that is fighting corruption. I have been an activist for several years before being appointed commissioner of the ACC of Sierra Leone. And I thought that fighting corruption is at the heart of Africa's rebirth. And if we have to change the dynamics, we have to tackle corruption head on. And that is what we are working on. So I will start the speech by saying that Africa is potentially the richest continent in the world. Yet, that is all what Africans has mostly been about since independence, coming after the resources of Africa, but we to get our act together to ensure that we occupy the position of respect that we have in. And the center of this is responsible for a lot of what is Africa. Because
I think the network is failing. Your voice is coming intermittently. It's quite great.
It is true.
Okay. All right, I think he'll be logging on again. The network was really bad. I could observe it, and I guess some of you did observe as well. So let's just give him a few minutes to come back and join us. In the meantime, Ms. Blossom, you were looking for Mr. Kenneth earlier, right? I think I see him on now.
For those that have just joined us, welcome guys. Our speaker at the moment is Sir Ben, and he is actually addressing us about the corruption that we have here in Africa. Let me just acknowledge Sir Kenneth as well. Welcome guys, it's great to have you guys here. Since we're still waiting on our speaker, can I just put you on the spot to just tell us how it was yesterday? How was the experience for you yesterday? Are you here with us? Kenneth, are you here with us? We really need to sit and find a way. Connections, guys. These are the ideas and solutions that we need to bring in.
That's what is happening right now. Even Mr. Ben is texting me. He's struggling with his connection. Oh, Africa.
So, the teaching profession, as I've been saying, that's why the difference.
Can you tell us about your experience yesterday and where you calling us from? Where you joining us from?
I'm from Sierra Leone, and my experience yesterday was a good one. I think I learned a lot from the presentations from the various speakers yesterday.
Can you tell us what's happening there that you would like
Sorry?
Africa Forum? Can you tell us the problems that you face today that you would like us to address as well?
Sorry?
Can you tell us the problems that you face in that side that you would like us to address as One Africa Forum?
The problems are many. The problems are many, but key among them that is killing us here is corruption. Thank God we have now Ben Kaifala, our commissioner here, will be giving us some lectures on issues of corruption. And he is trying so hard. He is trying very hard in reducing corruption in this part of Africa.
We acknowledge him.
Yeah, you know, the continent of Africa, our problems are more or like the same.
Yeah, that's what we're actually discussing on.
Our problems are more like the same. Sorry?
I was just letting you know that that's what we were actually discussing, that Africa has similar problems.
Sure.
It's always basic human rights that we're always fighting for.
I am back
Sure.
in.
Thank you.
Do you want to add anything on today? What are you expecting for today's program?
Now,
Can I
So please, let's leave it open to Mr. Ben Kaifala.
you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
All right, should I pick up from where I was?
Yes, sir.
please? Mr. Kenneth, can I just ask you to unmute yourself, please? To mute yourself.
We can hear you, sir. Please carry on, sir.
I think the other people should mute so that there are no feedback coming from their end. But yes, if you can hear me, so I was just saying that an increase in corruption by 1 point reduces GDP growth of a country by 0.13%. Consequently, the fight against corruption should be an African priority. That is, we should take it as a battle second to none. There is a new thinking and recognition that effective campaign against corruption at both local and international levels reduce poverty, prevents conflicts, protects the environment, promotes economic prosperity, of political and social stability, and guarantees the enjoyment and prosperity of youth and young people. As youth, for us, the time is now. Now is the time to stand up for Africa. Therefore, One Africa Forum, which we have described as a movement of organized bodies and individuals with vested interest in Africa's unity, must develop an absolute independence anchored on dignity, peace, and freedom. Have to recognize this, that the fight against corruption should firstly be owned by young people, particularly the generation that is regarded as the Y3DG. If Africa's future, particularly when they say Vision 2062, if that vision should be achieved, we have to be united against corruption. The emergence of the Y3DG is not only timely and relevant, it is also a must, and must ensure Africa youth say The time is now. And act now to end corruption. Africa is home to about 1.2 billion people. Over 60% of its population falls under the age of 25. I repeat that again. Over 60% of its population falls under the age of 25. The biggest and most productive category, therefore, the Y3GD generation, should have the greatest effect on all national issues on governance. I always say it in my country that if young people do not want a government to win an election, the government will never win. Because we have a blocking vote. We have a constituency that is large enough to prevent the older people from imposing anyone on us. So when there are leaders in African countries, most African countries that I know their population and the composition of their population, the young people have to agree that that person should be president. So if that person turns out to be corrupt, then we have ourselves to blame. The Y3DG is the engine of all successful states. Hence, we are duty-bound to do something to change the status quo. Certainly, as a continent and one people, we never will achieve peace, prosperity, stability, security, development, freedom, and unity. The Y3G generation can never achieve all our lofty ideals if we fail to combat corruption. The Y3D generation can never achieve all our lofty ideals and dreams if we fail to combat corruption. Defeat of corruption is a condition precedent for successful nations. The urgency is now and only now, not yesterday, because yesterday had passed. Not tomorrow, because tomorrow shall be too late. The dynamics of corruption in Africa shows serious dynamism of stealing state resources across ages. Even youth and young people have proven to be corrupt. As I speak with you, there are young people in our prisons who were arrested a few days ago because of their corrupt actions in some public spaces. The forms of corruption are many and complex to fully understand. No matter the style, type, or dynamics, the effects of same on the continent and its people have been bad. For it promotes wars, undermines development, and the constant, incurable cancer that affects our countries. It does not matter where you are in Africa. Corruption is a problem. It devours the country. Therefore, now is the time to defeat the cancer of corruption and move Africa forward. We can start this project by the Y3DG way: strategic grassroots mobilization, engaging with the youth across the continent through education and reorientation for Africa to remain in the grip of, for Africa not to remain in the grip of pervasive corruption. If we do not arrest it, it will continue to sap the continent of its life force and lays the ground for further conflicts. I'm sure most of you have heard about the Becky report. The Becky report showed that Africa was losing so much to corruption and illicit financial flows. But if we had controlled those, we would not need to get any aid coming to Africa, because what we are losing is far more than the volume of loans, the volume of aid that is coming to us from other countries. The Y3DG has great advantage to make a difference, given that Africa's population is young and growing at twice the pace of their continents. Half the current population of sub-Saharan Africa is under 25 years of age. And each year between 2015 and 2035, there will be 500,000 more 15-year-olds than the year before. Between 2015 and 2035, there will be 500,000 more 15-year-olds than the year before. This was a research done by Filmer and Fox in 2014. How then do we advance the social cohesion necessary to extreme poverty and promote shared prosperity in the fragile and conflict-affected situations on the continent? We should examine the core assumptions that underpin mainstream perceptions of the linkages between youth employment and fragility in Africa, and propose alternative routes, given the fact that old and current approaches have not significantly benefited the youth population of Africa. I argue that a nuanced understanding of specific groups of young people and their livelihood activities in their specific social, cultural, political, and economic context is necessary to understanding how young people in Africa, in relation to the relevant and problematic issues of youth unemployment, underdevelopment, livelihoods, and fragility, operate. For youth to fully contribute to their national dispensation, we should first overcome and fend off series of problems and challenges such as difficulty in accessing quality education and lack of formal vocational education. Education still remains a serious problem on the continent. And we have to ensure that there are more educated people in every country than there are not. And as it stands, except for a few countries, for example, in my country, we have an over 60% illiterate population. It is only now that the government has taken steps to introduce free quality education, which has increased the access to education. And we are expecting that after the next decade, we would have completely halved that number of literate people. We should also be able to overcome unemployment, underemployment, and inappropriate training for the opportunities of the job market. Of course, we don't only have issues of unemployment. Somebody can be employed but completely underemployed. And that is also a serious problem which we have to deal with. The involvement in violent conflicts. Violent conflicts continue to plague Africa. Of course, you know what is happening right now in Ethiopia and some aspects of Eritrea. Of course, we still have the DR Congo problems with us and a few other countries where violence. We just saw what is happening in Nigeria with SARS. These were all young people involved. And it was, in fact, young people who were facing the biggest effect. We are also dealing with drugs and substance abuse, poverty, inadequate opportunities to participate in political and socio-economic decision-making, lack of technological advancement, high vulnerability to sexually transmitted infections such as HIV/AIDS, and waterborne diseases such as typhoid fever, malaria, Ebola, and various pandemics like COVID-19, which is currently affecting the rest of the world. Given this reality, youth have been at the brunt of the suffering in Africa. Poverty, illiteracy, war, and its attendant consequences of all which are mostly a consequence of corruption. Let us not make any mistake. All these things are vestiges of corruption, because had Africa got to this act together, some 60 years after most of our countries got independence, we would have developed systems, processes, mechanisms to be able to confront these issues. Unemployment, for example, will have attracted enough investment, we will have taken care of our business in such a way so that we can absorb the number of people who are leaving the educational system, particularly the formal educational system, into our everyday life. Therefore, what can young people do, particularly the Y3DG generation, in combating corruption? Y3G members should be taught and be able to act on how to effectively detect, prevent, and fight corruption. Education on corruption has to be included in our syllabuses. It has to be included in our daily lives. Children should be taught from the grassroots coming up about what corruption is, what its effects are, and what should be done to deal with it. These are done in countries like the Scandinavian countries have serious ethical training in their civic education for their population. In Africa, we don't have that. At least in most countries. In my country, for example, it's only now that we are trying to include anti-corruption issues in the civic education syllabus. To this end, it is highly significant to devise appropriate empowerment strategies to raise their awareness and understanding on corruption and the way it undermines democratic societies, at the same time build capacity to stand up against corruption. Because we cannot just be teaching and allow the plunder to continue. Whilst we are learning about it, we should also be ready to stand against it. Central to the Y3DG should be the crafting of policy documents for continental consumption of the ways of molding an effective youth force with a fight mentality, integrity, and correct ethical standards to successfully lead Africa out of poverty. We cannot develop Africa if we do not build it on a 100% foundation of integrity. In order to get the youth to become and remain engaged in anti-corruption initiatives, Y3DG should engage in serious advocacies for youth and young people to be included as stakeholders in national state governance, especially anti-corruption policy development and implementation of anti-corruption strategies. In Sierra Leone, for example, I am a young person and I was appointed commissioner 3 years ago when I was way, way younger, because young people said, we want to own the fight against corruption, and that is our man. Mr. President, we have voted for you, but we don't want anything else. Appoint all your ministers, appoint anybody you want to any position, do whatever you want, but when it comes to the fight against corruption, we want one of us. At that time, I was in fact doing master's degree in the US. And they said that that man is our man to occupy the position to fight corruption in Sierra Leone. For 18 years, we have been trying. Things are not changing. Bring that man back. And if you bring him back and put him in that position, we are happy. You can do anything else you want. And that is how I was appointed Commissioner of the Anti-Corruption of the Republic of Sierra Leone by the President. And the young people now own the fight against corruption in Sierra Leone. It is that kind of inclusiveness that is needed for young people not to only be considered as statistics, for young people to have a seat on the table so that they can participate. Youth must be in a position to perceive ownership of the actions they are involved in. The more the youth take the lead, the better the policies have the chance to succeed, because youth are the biggest factor in the governance issues. In fact, youth initiatives become even more structural when integrated in larger campaigns on anti-corruption. Young people are more likely to be creative in their approach to problem solving. Anti-corruption efforts may be more innovative, forward-thinking, and making better use of the modern technologies. On International Anti-Corruption Days 2 days ago in Sierra Leone, for example, before now, when we have Anti-Corruption Day, we invite permanent secretaries, ministers, heads of departments, and sometimes the president. In fact, the year before, it was the vice president of the Republic of Sierra Leone who was the guest speaker. This year, we said we don't want any of them on our table. We are bringing young people from across the country in a conference room, representatives and leaders, for us to discuss corruption and develop a manifesto on corruption. That happened 2 days ago on International Anti-Corruption Day. So it was young people, and you should have seen how lively the conversations were, how well women participated, young women, and the views and ideas which they brought on the table, which we are now using to fight corruption. What should be the objectives and specific goals? The main objective or goals of Y3DG should be the advancement and role of youth in national development, particularly the anti-corruption crusade, along the following objectives. So this is where we should be going as Africans if we really want to own the fight against corruption and liberate our continent from the mire of poverty. Anti-corruption policy making and improving youth capacity to unveil and impose corruption and oppose corruption. Anti-corruption education and fight against corruption in education. In my country, for example, we have a serious, our campaign is not just limited going after the corrupt in public service. We have developed a massive militarized campaign against examination malpractice. Because you see, if young people are cheating in educational institutions, and later they become leaders, that is going to come with them into leadership. And they want to cheat their way in life. So we have developed a serious, massive campaign against examination malpractice. And yesterday, I was with the President, the Minister of Education, and we are discussing this on a national education, what they call a National Education Week, where we discuss about the current status of education and the way forward with it. And I was speaking there, and what we were discussing was our campaign against examination malpractice. So every African continent has to do this. We cannot allow our children to be cheating their way through education, access educational system, continue to cheat their way there, and then occupy positions of leadership. We will not be able to emancipate ourselves from where we are. We have to develop policies that protect youth whistleblowers. Young people should be willing and able to come forward when they see corruption, when they see something, to say something, but they should also be protected. Because without protection, we will know what's happening. You saw in Ghana, young people were killed, they were shot and killed in the streets of Ghana because of exposing corruption. The protection of advancement of public officials who are youth. Every country has to take steps to ensure that we have examples of young people in public service who can in turn be young examples of what it means to be young and be productive in a good way. That is why, for example, because of the kind of work we are doing in Sierra Leone and how it has received effects, I receive awards every now and then. In the past 12 days alone, I have received 4 awards, both national and international. I put it on social media every time. It's for the young people to see and know that when you work, you can have rewards and recognition. And that can serve as an example for them. Invariably, the Y3DG must see and treat as a set of inextricably linked and interconnected tasks geared towards contributing to achieving the overall goals of the state. So young people have to also understand that they are not a republic of their own. They have to be part of achieving. So, for example, every country, in most countries, they have a national development plan. Young people have to find a way to fit in that national development plan and contribute to it. In the next decade, we expect YTDG in all its local chapters. So what I'm saying is I'm expecting that you have chapters in countries. If you don't, you need to do that. You need to have young people who should take leadership there. But those young people are expected to do the following. 1, influence policy making to improve youth capacity in order to unveil and oppose corruption at all levels in Africa. So I told you about what the young people did when they called that I should be appointed commissioner, and basically even to me dictated what agenda I should lead for the country in the fight against corruption. Every chapter should have that. That ability to influence policy making to improve the capacity of youth. To support initiatives and encourage the participation of young people in integrity activities across Africa through youth integrity camps and training programs on anti-corruption policies and issues. To involve relevant youth organizations and representatives in framing and implementation of anti-corruption policies pertaining to the field where youth are active, in particular politics, education, sports, and the media. These are where youth are most active, no matter what country you take in Africa. Youth are active, in particular in politics, education, sports, and the media. We have to harness that and be able to influence things from there. If we influence things, for example, in politics, if we influence things within the political arena. In Sierra Leone, when we wanted to speak to the former president, it has been taboo all these years to speak to a former president. When he leaves power, it does not matter how much plunder he causes the country or how many blames are on him. Everybody just says, oh, he's the former president, let's respect him and let's move on. I said, no. We have to speak to the former president. And it is going to be a police-type interrogation on issues of corruption. When we went to invite him to speak to him at his house, at his mansion, which is a 25 acres mansion, it was young people who blocked us. It was young people who occupied the streets. It was young people who built the blockades. It was the young people who serve as human shield. And we have to find a way to navigate that for us to be able to speak to him. We have to uphold youth organization initiatives and actions in the fight against corruption in particular, through targeted support to selected youth projects. So we have to also find ways to support youth projects for them to succeed and serve as an example. To set up national networks where young people can share their experience and knowledge about corruption, disseminate good practices, and advise proposals for future action. We have to do that. To foster the approach that quality education will only be achieved and corruption effectively addressed if all relevant sectors of society commit fully to the fundamental positive ethical principles for public and professional life, rather than relying only upon top-down mechanisms or regulatory measures. To introduce integrity studies as from the earliest stage. I have told you in Scandinavia, when a child goes to school, they ask them, good morning, madam. Do not take what does not belong to you. Children, 3 years old. What you should not do, do not take what does not belong to you. But we in Africa, we spend time teaching our children, Baba Black Sheep, have you any wool? Yes, sir, 3 bags full. We could devise our messages in a better way for it to capture in their minds their civic responsibilities as citizens. Side by side, these recreational rhymes that we have. What African countries have developed this, we have to ask ourselves. To engage youth in a strategy to fight education fraud with the help of relevant stakeholders. To involve young anti-corruption crusaders in developing strategies against corruption and unethical behavior within an educational system through participation in the drafting of ethical charts and codes of conduct for schools and universities, staff, and students. To design an integrity or transparency index in a bid to encouraging educational institutions to be more transparent with regards to their budgets and internal procedures, including but not limited to staff promotions, exams marking, and entry grades. I keep repeating education. That is the foundation. If the educational system lacks integrity, it produces people without integrity. To develop anti-corruption educational materials aimed at students and teachers at various levels in Africa. To support the work of organizations engaged in providing legal service, advice, training, and support and reporting and denouncing incidents of corruption. To consider setting up a support fund for helping youth whistleblowers cope with direct and indirect consequences of their actions. For example, there are countries where if young people whistleblow, the system retaliates against them. What have we done to come together as a continent or in our individual countries to stand with them and to support them in those difficult circumstances? To support the creation of e-platforms where all citizens can access information on how to combat corruption and share knowledge of good practices. This is our generation. This is the technology generation. Do we have platforms in our respective African countries for young people to engage on corruption issues, interact on it like we do on WhatsApp and all these other people, for them to discuss and expose corruption, but also share ideas about corruption? These are things that the YPD should work on. To consider introducing an anti-corruption training and certification system for persons seeking employment. We have to ask this. A kind of vetting system for people who seek and enter public employment, that they do not have bad records of behaviors that are unacceptable in public service. How many African countries have that? To involve relevant youth organizations and or representatives in the framing and implementation of anti-corruption policies pertaining to the field where youth are active, in particular politics, education, support. So this should be, all these broad categories, they all do not need to be achieved at the same time. Every country can tailor what best suits it. But these are the myriad of issues that we could work on as a generation if we want to contribute to Africa being where it is. As I conclude, we have to understand that we have to be the examples that we want to hold other people. We have to be the standard that we want to hold other people to. So, you yourself as a young person, do not be corrupt. As citizens, let us reject corruption in all its shapes and forms. From the household to public life, we should lead our lives as emblems of integrity. We should advocate for better pay for public officers and even private sector. Explore innovative methods of transaction and avoid the cash-based system in Africa. We should report corruption and live with integrity. As a new generation of politicians, entrepreneurs, and civil society actors, The youth of Africa must have an important role to play in bringing a new culture of integrity to all levels of society. Let me leave with this beautiful example of a story. The Thai Youth Anti-Corruption Network is a student-led network that was created in 2012 in partnership with UNDP and Konkan University College in local administration. It started off as a group of 36 students with a mission to eliminate corruption from Thai society through the empowerment of young people. The project was built on the objective to make students take a pledge to refuse to be corrupt. In 1 year, the campaign managed to grow to a network of 4,000 students in 90 universities. This initiative is completely bottom-up, meaning that the direction given the leadership arises from the students themselves. The students created their identity, logo, and messaging by themselves. The network organizes conferences and camps to raise awareness among students about the negative effects of corruption and the importance of taking action, as well as campaigns and public events. The students use Facebook as a platform to exchange information and coordinate their work. They provide trainings on social media as an advocacy tool to widen the core groups of communicators and partner with more universities to promote integrity. The significant growth of the network as well as the quality of the activities undertaken has attracted the attention of other institutions and networks in the country, such as the private sector anti-corruption network led by the Thai Businessmen and Industry Association, including the Thai Chamber of Commerce, the Thai Bankers Association, the Federation of Thai Industries, and the Stock Exchange of Thailand, with which the youth network signed up partnership. This is an example of the power of youth cooperation in countries' efforts to curb corruption. Our destiny is our hands, Y3DG. We cannot have other people come and remake, rethink, and reproduce Africa. We have to invent Africa ourselves. And if we have to leave Africa better than our parents have left it to us, we have to unite and be willing to take positive action, proactive steps to redirect the energy of Africa. And there is no greater need for us to do that now than to fight corruption. I thank you all.
Oh, thank you very much. That was such